For the Amish, raising chickens is not just about fresh eggs and meat. It's a living example of how a farm can operate in harmony with the land without relying on store-bought feed or expensive additives. In many Amish communities, feeding chickens for free isn't considered a hack or modern discovery. It's simply the way things have always been done. This tradition is rooted in the belief that animals should be sustained by what the land naturally provides, rather than being dependent on outside suppliers. It's a philosophy of self-sufficiency that turns every scrap, seed, insect, and weed into part of a well-orchestrated food cycle. Instead of viewing chicken feed as something that must be purchased in 50-pound sacks from a store, the Amish design their farms so that the chickens themselves do most of the work in finding food. This begins with letting birds roam in large, open areas where they can scratch for seeds, weeds, and insects. In many cases, the land has been prepared in such a way that it is naturally abundant with edible plant growth. Wild grasses, clover patches, alfalfa, and even kitchen garden leftovers. By giving chickens the freedom to forage across a wide space, they can harvest much of their own protein and carbohydrate needs directly from the environment. Amish farmers also understand the seasons and how each one offers different natural feeding opportunities. In spring, as fields are tilled and soil is turned, chickens are allowed in to devour weed sprouts, worms, and grubs. In summer, they feast on grasshoppers, beetles, and seeds dropped from ripening crops. Autumn brings fallen grains from harvest time, while winter is supplemented by stored resources gathered earlier in the year. In this way, the Amish think of chicken feeding not as a daily chore that requires a trip to the feed store, but as part of the broader rhythm of the farm, where every season has its own natural menu for the flock. This philosophy has two huge advantages. It saves money, sometimes eliminating feed costs entirely, and it produces stronger, healthier chickens that lay richer, more nutritious eggs. Birds that forage for their food consume a wide variety of plants and insects, which boosts their immune systems and reduces the need for medications. The eggs from these birds often have deeper yellow yolks, higher omega-3 content, and better flavor compared to birds raised on commercial pellets alone. For the Amish, this is proof that working with nature, rather than trying to bypass it with industrial solutions, results in both better food and a better way of life. Turning farm and kitchen scraps into a year-round chicken buffet. One of the most practical and time-tested ways the Amish feed chickens for free is by turning every scrap from the kitchen and the farm into feed. In an Amish household, nothing edible ever truly goes to waste. If it's not fit for human consumption, it's almost certainly still valuable to a chicken. This system is so embedded in their daily life that many Amish homes have dedicated scrap buckets, not for the trash, but for the flock. Throughout the day, food leftovers, corn cobs, potato peels, stale bread, vegetable trimmings, fruit cores, and even small amounts of cooked grains are collected and set aside. At mealtime, for the birds, these scraps are either tossed directly into the chicken yard or mixed into a mash that makes them easier to eat. The Amish take care to ensure these scraps aren't just random waste. They deliberately prepare extra when cooking, knowing that what doesn't end up on the family's table will be gladly devoured by the hens. For example, during summer when the garden is in full swing, oversized cucumbers, split tomatoes, or slightly wilted greens that wouldn't sell at market are chopped and given to the chickens. In fall, pumpkins and squash, too tough for cooking, are split open so the birds can peck out the seeds and flesh, providing both nutrition and entertainment. Even dairy waste, like whey from cheese-making or soured milk, is poured into troughs where chickens lap it up, gaining extra protein and calcium for strong egg production. What really makes this method sustainable is that it's combined with farm byproducts, from field work. After sweet corn is harvested, for instance, the stalks and husks are chopped and scattered in the chicken yard. Grain sweepings from barn floors, tiny bits of oats, barley, or wheat that spill during threshing, are saved instead of discarded. In winter, when foraging opportunities are scarce, these preserved scraps become a lifeline. Amish families will pull out root-cellar stores of cabbage, turnips, or beet tops that are no longer fresh for people, but perfectly fine for poultry. This constant recycling of household and farm waste creates a closed-loop system. The family feeds the chickens with what would otherwise be discarded, and in return, the chickens produce eggs, meat, and manure that enriches the garden soil. It's an arrangement that saves hundreds of dollars a year in feed costs, while ensuring the flock gets a diet full of variety and natural nutrients. For the Amish, this is not just thriftiness, it's good stewardship, a belief that everything on the farm has a purpose and nothing should be squandered. Growing and storing. Feed crops for a self-sustaining flock. While the Amish are masters at using scraps and foraging to feed their chickens, they also think ahead by growing specific crops intended primarily for poultry feed. This is where their farming skills and long-term planning really shine. Instead of depending on the feed mill, they dedicate portions of their fields or garden plots to plants that chickens can eat fresh in the summer or as stored feed in the winter. The goal is to produce high-energy grains, nutrient-rich greens, and protein sources entirely on site, ensuring their flock eats well without a single purchase from a store. In the warm months, these feed plots might include corn, wheat, oats, rye, barley, sunflowers, clover, and alfalfa. Corn provides energy-rich carbohydrates. Wheat and oats supply protein and fiber. Rye and barley add variety and bulk. Clover and alfalfa deliver essential vitamins and minerals. Sunflowers are grown not only for their seeds, which are a high-protein treat for chickens, but also for their tall stalks, which provide shade in the chicken yard when hung whole. These crops are planted in succession so that something is always ready to harvest: greens in spring, grains in summer, seed heads in fall. The Amish are strategic about when and how these crops are fed to the flock. During the growing season, chickens might be turned into a harvested grain field to clean up dropped kernels and eat insects hiding among the stalks. In fall, when seeds mature, Amish families gather and store the harvest. Corn is dried on the cob in ventilated cribs, oats and barley are stored in bins or burlap sacks, and sunflower heads are hung from rafters in the barn to dry. These stored feeds become critical during the winter months when the ground is frozen and fresh forage is scarce. Another clever trick is growing fodder indoors during winter, sprouting grains like wheat or barley in trays so they become lush mats of green shoots within a week. This provides a steady supply of fresh greens even in January, giving chickens vital vitamins they would otherwise miss. Amish families often grow these fodder trays in unheated outbuildings or in a sunny greenhouse corner, watering daily until they're ready to feed. The roots, shoots, and grain are all eaten with nothing going to waste. By growing their own feed crops, the Amish not only ensure their chickens have a balanced diet year-round, but they also protect themselves from feed price fluctuations and shortages. It's a closed system that starts with seed in the ground and ends with eggs in the basket, self-reliant, predictable, and entirely under their control. For a homesteader wanting true independence, this approach means your flock is never dependent on a feed store's schedule, stock, or prices. Free-range foraging and rotational grazing for endless free feed. For the Amish, the cheapest and most natural chicken feed is the kind the birds find for themselves. Free-ranging is more than just letting hens wander. It's a carefully managed system designed to maximize food availability while preventing overgrazing or land damage. In many Amish homesteads, chickens are not confined to a single coop run, but are rotated through different areas of pasture, orchards, gardens, and field edges. This rotational grazing ensures that each patch of ground has time to recover, regrow vegetation, and repopulate with insects before the flock returns. When chickens free range, they're constantly working, scratching the soil for weed seeds, snapping up grasshoppers, beetles, worms, ticks, and other protein-rich insects. In spring, the newly tilled garden or plowed field becomes a feast of fresh weeds and exposed bugs. In summer, tall grass pastures provide seeds and shade, while orchards supply fallen fruit and the insects that come with it. By autumn, chickens are scavenging leftover grain in harvested fields, cleaning up what combines leave behind. Even in winter, free-ranging on thawed days gives them access to dormant seeds, dried plant stalks, and any overwintering pests they can dig out. The Amish also plan these foraging areas with the flock's diet in mind. Clover-rich fields offer high-protein greens. It's a perfect exchange. The chickens feed themselves while providing pest control and natural fertilizer through their droppings. To keep foraging productive year-round, the Amish avoid overcrowding their pastures and always have at least 2 or 3 plots to rotate. In smaller homesteads, temporary fencing, such as movable poultry netting, creates fresh sections of forage without the cost of permanent pasture divisions. Even the location of coops is part of the rotation strategy. By moving the coop periodically, manure is evenly spread, and chickens always have a fresh patch to explore each morning. This method has an added bonus. Birds raised on a free-range, insect and plant-rich diet produce eggs with deep orange yolks, higher omega-3 content, and richer flavor. Their meat also develops better texture and taste. For the Amish, rotational free-ranging isn't just about saving money, it's about raising healthier birds, improving the land, and ensuring the farm runs as a balanced ecosystem. By letting the flock harvest their own feed directly from nature, the need for purchased grain drops dramatically, often to zero for much of the year. Wild harvesting and seasonal abundance beyond the farm fence. While most people think of chicken feed as something stored neatly in a sack, the Amish see the entire surrounding landscape as a giant pantry for their flock. Beyond their own property lines, they take full advantage of nature's seasonal bounty, gathering wild plants, seeds, and natural protein sources that can keep chickens fed for free year-round. This practice is especially valuable during late summer and fall when wild edibles are at their peak, and it ensures that not a single food source in their environment goes untapped. In spring, Amish families might gather armfuls of fresh dandelion greens, chickweed, and plantain leaves from roadside edges or uncultivated fields. These greens are chopped and tossed to the chickens for an instant vitamin boost, especially after winter when fresh forage is scarce. Wild nettles are another favorite. They're rich in minerals and protein, and when chopped or dried, the stinging hairs no longer bother the birds. Spring also brings swarms of insects, and the Amish sometimes intentionally shake bushes or compost piles to dislodge beetles, crickets, and caterpillars directly into the chicken yard for a free protein feast. Summer is when wild harvesting truly shines. Roadsides, ditches, and fence lines are full of seed-heavy grasses like foxtail, timothy, and millet. Amish children often help by cutting entire seed heads with a scythe or sickle and bundling them to dry. Once cured, these bundles can be hung in the chicken coop and pecked at slowly over the winter months, providing both food and entertainment. Sunflower patches, whether grown intentionally or found wild, are stripped of their heads and stored for cold weather feeding. Even weeds from the family garden, such as lamb's quarters and pigweed, are harvested before they flower and either fed fresh or dried for later use. Fall is all about gleaning, collecting what's left in harvested fields, a practice rooted in biblical tradition and still common in Amish farming culture. After corn, oats, barley, or wheat are brought in, the fields are open for the flock to scavenge every leftover kernel, spilled grain, and stray seed. Amish farmers also pick up windfall fruit from orchards, like bruised apples, pears, and plums, which are split open and offered to the birds. This not only feeds the chickens, but helps clean up potential pest and disease problems for the next season's crops. Winter doesn't stop wild harvesting, it just shifts the strategy. Stalks of dried grasses, seed heads left standing in the field, and clusters of berries like sumac and rose hips can all be gathered in advance and stored for cold months. Amish families keep these treasures in burlap sacks or hung in the rafters, so even when snow blankets the ground, the chickens get the variety and nutrition they need without a cent spent on store feed. By integrating wild harvesting into their feeding plan, the Amish reduce their dependence on cultivated crops and tap into the free abundance that nature produces without human intervention. It's a system that rewards observation, seasonal awareness, and a willingness to put in the manual effort to collect what others overlook. And for a homesteader, learning this method means your chickens can thrive on food sources available all around you if you know when and where to look. Preserving free feed for the lean winter months. Feeding chickens for free during spring, summer, and fall is relatively easy when the land is overflowing with green plants, seeds, and insects. But the real challenge, and where the Amish excel, is in making sure that abundance lasts through the long, cold months when snow covers the ground and nothing grows. The Amish treat feed preservation with the same seriousness as they do preserving their own food for winter. They don't just rely on one method, they combine drying, fermenting, storing whole crops, and making nutrient-rich feed blocks to ensure their flock never goes hungry without ever buying commercial feed. Drying and hanging. All through summer and early fall, Amish families gather seed heads, leafy greens, and even root crops to be dried for later. Grains like wheat, oats, barley, and millet are tied into tight bundles and hung upside down in barns or sheds where air circulates freely, keeping them mold-free. These bundles can be hung inside the coop in winter for the birds to peck at gradually, giving them both nutrition and entertainment during the months when they can't forage outdoors. Root cellar storage. Just like with their own vegetables, the Amish store chicken-friendly root crops in cool, dark cellars. Turnips, mangels, a type of beet grown for animal feed, carrots and cabbages are layered in bins with straw or sawdust to keep them fresh for months. These are periodically pulled out, chopped, and given to the flock, especially valuable in January and February when fresh produce is scarce. Fermentation. The Amish often ferment grains or chopped vegetables in barrels, creating a probiotic-rich feed that not only lasts longer, but also improves digestion and nutrient absorption in chickens. Fermenting grains like corn or wheat in water for a few days makes them softer, more digestible, and richer in beneficial bacteria. Feed blocks and suet cakes. Another trick is mixing stored grains with rendered animal fat, seeds, and dried greens to form dense feed blocks or suet cakes. Once hardened, these are hung in the coop, where the birds can peck at them slowly, getting concentrated nutrition and calories during the coldest stretches. This also reduces boredom-related pecking, which can be a problem in confined winter housing. By combining these preservation methods, Amish homesteads essentially create a chicken pantry that's as well stocked as their own family's winter food stores. Every summer and fall chore, gathering seeds, drying greens, filling root cellars, is an investment that pays off months later when other farmers are paying premium prices for bagged feed. The Amish never let abundance go to waste, and their winter-ready feeding system means the flock stays healthy, productive, and well-fed, all without spending a penny. Partnering chickens with larger livestock for endless free feed. One of the Amish community's most brilliant zero-cost feeding methods isn't about planting more or storing more, it's about letting other animals do the work for you. On many Amish farms, chickens aren't kept in isolation. They're integrated into the daily rhythm of larger livestock like cows, horses, goats, and pigs. This multi-species system creates a natural chain of food opportunities where chickens follow behind the bigger animals, collecting everything from spilled grain to nutrient-rich insects stirred up by hooves and manure. The result? A constant buffet of high-protein, high-energy feed that costs nothing and requires almost no human labor once the system is in place. Following the feed trail. Horses and cows are often fed grains such as oats, barley, or cracked corn. Even with careful feeding, there's always some spillage, kernels that drop into the bedding, fall between boards, or get left behind in feed troughs. When chickens are allowed to roam in these areas after the larger animals finish eating, they clean up every last morsel, converting waste into eggs and meat. This cleanup crew role isn't just thrifty, it also keeps barns tidier and reduces the chances of spilled feed attracting rodents. Manure equals protein source. Another overlooked benefit is what's inside the manure itself. Many grains pass through larger animals only partially digested, meaning manure can contain intact seeds and grains that chickens eagerly scratch out and eat. But the bigger win is in the insect life. Flies and beetles lay eggs in fresh manure, and within days, the larvae, maggots, become a protein-rich snack for the flock. By turning over manure piles and scratching through bedding, chickens find a nearly endless supply of living protein, especially in warmer months. This reduces or even eliminates the need for high-cost protein supplements in their diet. Pig pens and goat yards. Even in smaller homesteads, chickens are often given access to goat yards and pig pens. Pigs spill plenty of feed during their enthusiastic eating, and goats are messy eaters, dropping leaves, stems, and grains that chickens quickly claim. In the process, the chickens act as pest control, keeping fly populations down and reducing the spread of parasites between animals. By integrating chickens with other livestock, the Amish create a symbiotic farm ecosystem where waste becomes resource, pests become protein, and nothing edible ever goes unused. This setup slashes feed bills to nearly zero while keeping the farm cleaner and healthier overall. For a homesteader, it's a reminder that sometimes the smartest feeding strategy isn't about working harder. It's about letting your animals work for each other. The Amish year-round, closed-loop feeding system. By the time you've seen all the individual methods, scrap feeding, homegrown grains, wild harvesting, rotational grazing, winter preservation, and partnering chickens with larger livestock, you start to realize the Amish aren't just using a few tricks here and there. They've built a closed-loop system where every season naturally flows into the next, every resource is used to its fullest, and every part of the farm contributes to keeping the flock fed without spending a single cent. It's not a set of random hacks. It's a complete, interlinked cycle that's been fine-tuned over generations. Spring is when foraging is at its richest. Fresh weeds like chickweed, nettles, and dandelions pop up, Insects emerge from the soil, and newly tilled garden beds provide worms and sprouting seeds. Chickens follow the plows, cleaning fields and gardens while feeding themselves. The genius of the Amish method lies in resource layering, never relying on just one feed source, but having 5 or 6 working together at all times. Scraps fill the gaps, free-range foraging cuts, grain needs, wild harvesting boosts variety, preservation bridges seasonal shortages, and livestock integration keeps protein levels high. By thinking of the flock as part of the entire farm ecosystem rather than a separate project that must be fed, the Amish ensure that nothing goes to waste and everything feeds into everything else. For a homesteader, copying this system means shifting from a store-bought mentality to a farm-fed mentality, where your land, your waste, your seasons, and your animals work together to feed your chickens. Once you set it up, the system becomes self-sustaining, and feed bills become a thing of the past. The Amish don't just raise chickens, they weave them into the life of the farm so completely that feeding them for free is simply a natural byproduct of how they live.